Child's desperate cries vanish inside a deadly storm, and only one person dares to chase them. What she finds out there on the open prairie will change everything, but not in the way anyone expects. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The storm descended upon the Great Plains like a vengeful spirit, though it was no mystical force but rather nature's raw and merciless power. Dark clouds rolled across the endless grasslands of Wyoming Territory, swallowing the late afternoon sun and plunging the Cheyenne encampment into premature twilight. The wind howled with such ferocity that it bent the tall prairie grass nearly horizontal, and the first drops of rain fell like bullets against the buffalo hide teepees. Sarah Morrison stood at the entrance of the lodge where she had been held captive for 3 months, her green eyes scanning the chaos unfolding before her. At 24 years old, she possessed a striking beauty that had not been diminished by her ordeal. Her auburn hair, once styled in the fashion of Boston society, now hung in a long braid down her back. Her pale skin had been touched by the sun, giving her a glow that made her seem less like the pampered daughter of a wealthy railroad magnate, and more like someone who had learned to survive against impossible odds. The Cheyenne warriors rushed through the camp, securing supplies and herding horses toward shelter. Women gathered children and ducked into their homes, their movements efficient and practiced. Sarah had learned much about these people during her captivity, though she had never stopped longing for freedom. They were not the savages she had been taught to fear in her childhood, but rather a proud nation fighting to preserve their way of life against an encroaching world that sought to erase them. "Stay inside, white woman," growled Broken Arrow, one of the warriors assigned to guard her. He was a stern man of perhaps 40 winters, his face marked by a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "This storm will be fierce." Sarah nodded, understanding more of the Cheyenne language now than she had when she was first taken from the wagon train that had been transporting her west to meet her intended husband, a man she had never met but had been promised to by her father in a business arrangement. The attack had been swift and brutal, and she had been the only survivor, spared for reasons she still did not fully understand. Thunder cracked across the sky like a whip, so loud that Sarah felt it in her chest. The rain intensified, becoming a solid wall of water that obscured everything beyond a few feet. She retreated into the teepee, but something made her pause. Through the chaos of wind and rain, through the shouting of warriors and the crying of frightened children, she heard something else, a child's voice, crying, calling out in terror. Sarah's heart clenched. She knew that cry. It belonged to little Hawk, the 7-year-old son of Chief Running Bear. The boy had been kind to her, bringing her water when her guards forgot, teaching her words in his language with the patient enthusiasm of childhood. His mother, Gentle Rain, had died the previous winter from illness, and the boy had seemed to adopt Sarah as a surrogate presence, despite the vast cultural divide between them. She stepped back to the entrance, peering into the storm. The voice came again, more distant now, swallowed by the wind almost as soon as it reached her ears. Her eyes darted around the camp, searching for any sign of the boy, but visibility was nearly zero. The rain fell so thick and fast that it created a gray curtain between her and the rest of the world. "Little Hawk," she called out, her voice lost in the tempest. No one else seemed to hear the boy's cries. The other Cheyenne were already inside their lodges, secure against the storm's fury. Sarah's mind raced. Every instinct told her to stay put, to remain safe in the shelter of the teepee. But the memory of Little Hawk's smile, the way he had tried to comfort her when she wept for her lost life, the small kindnesses he had shown when no one else had dared befriend the captive white woman, all of these things pulled at her heart with an irresistible force. She had been raised in comfort, sheltered from hardship, taught that a woman's place was in refined society. But 3 months in captivity had changed her. She had discovered reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. She had learned to endure, to observe, to survive, and now she could not stand by while a child was in danger. Making her decision in an instant, Sarah grabbed a thick buffalo hide from the pile of blankets and threw it over her shoulders. She pulled it tight around her body and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her off her feet. The rain was so cold it stole her breath, soaking through her buckskin dress within seconds. She squinted against the deluge, trying to orient herself in the chaos. The familiar landmarks of the camp had vanished, transformed into indistinct shapes that appeared and disappeared in the shifting curtain of rain. "Little Hawk!" she screamed, her voice cracking with effort. "Where are you?" For a moment there was nothing but the roar of wind and water. Then, faint and far away, she heard it again. The boy's voice calling out in Cheyenne, "Help me! I am lost! Father, where are you?" Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she stumbled forward, following the sound. Her feet slipped in mud that had formed almost instantly on the packed earth of the camp. She caught herself against what she thought was a teepee, but when lightning flashed, she realized she had already left the main encampment behind. The open prairie stretched before her, a vast and treacherous expanse in the grip of the storm. Panic flickered at the edges of her mind, but she pushed it away. Little Hawk was out there, alone and terrified. She could not abandon him. "I am coming!" she shouted into the wind, though she doubted he could hear her. "Keep calling to me!" The boy's voice came again, and Sarah forced herself forward. The grass was slick beneath her feet, the ground uneven and dangerous. She had no idea how far she had come, or in what direction she was heading. The storm had disoriented her completely, stripping away any sense of direction. But still she pressed on, driven by a fierce determination that surprised even herself. Lightning split the sky, and in its brief illumination, Sarah saw him. Little Hawk stood perhaps 50 yards away, his small form barely visible through the rain. He was alone on the prairie, turned around in confusion, calling out desperately for help that had not come. Until now. "Little Hawk!" Sarah screamed with every ounce of strength she possessed. "Stay there! Do not move!" The boy's head turned toward her voice, and even through the storm she could see the relief on his face. She struggled toward him, fighting against wind that seemed determined to push her back, against rain that blinded her, against mud that sucked at her feet with every step. When she finally reached him, she dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms. He was shaking violently, his small body soaked and cold. He wrapped his arms around her neck and pressed his face against her shoulder, his sobs mixing with the sound of the storm. "I am here," Sarah said, holding him tight. "You are safe now. I have you." But even as she spoke the words, she realized the terrible truth. They were lost on the open prairie in the worst storm she had ever witnessed. She had no idea which direction would lead them back to camp. The visibility was so poor that she could not see more than a few feet in any direction. And the temperature was dropping rapidly as evening approached. They were in grave danger, and it was entirely her fault. Sarah pushed down the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She could not afford to panic. Little Hawk needed her to be strong, to be calm, to find a way to keep them both alive until the storm passed or until help arrived. She pulled the buffalo hide more tightly around both of them, creating a small shelter against the worst of the rain. Little Hawk clung to her, his small hands gripping the fabric of her dress with desperate strength. "We will be all right," she told him, speaking in the halting Cheyenne she had learned. "We must find shelter. Can you walk?" The boy nodded against her shoulder, though she could feel him trembling. Sarah forced herself to her feet, keeping Little Hawk pressed against her side, wrapped in the buffalo hide with her. She scanned the gray chaos around them, searching for any landmark, any feature that might provide shelter or direction. Another flash of lightning revealed a dark shape in the distance. At first, Sarah thought it might be a teepee or perhaps a group of trees, but as she strained her eyes through the rain, she realized it was an outcropping of rocks, rising perhaps 10 or 12 feet from the prairie floor. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. "This way," she said, tugging Little Hawk forward. They moved together, two small figures dwarfed by the immensity of the storm and the prairie. Every step was a battle, but Sarah refused to give up. She had come too far, risked too much to fail now. They reached the rocks after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes. The outcropping formed a shallow overhang. Not quite a cave, but enough to provide some protection from the rain and wind. Sarah guided Little Hawk under the shelter and collapsed beside him, her body shaking from exertion and cold. The boy looked up at her with dark eyes full of trust and gratitude. "You came for me," he said in Cheyenne. "No one else heard me." Sarah brushed his wet hair back from his forehead. her heart aching at his words. "I will always come for you," she said, surprised by the truth of the statement. This child, son of the people who had taken her freedom, had somehow claimed a piece of her heart. They huddled together under the overhang as the storm raged on. Sarah knew they were far from safe, but for now they were alive and together. She could only hope that someone from the camp would realize they were missing and come searching. What she did not know was that someone already had. Swift Eagle had been preparing his horse for the storm when he noticed his younger brother was missing. At 28 years old, he was the eldest son of Chief Running Bear and the finest warrior in the tribe. His reputation for courage and skill in battle was matched only by his devotion to his family. With broad shoulders, powerful arms, and a face marked by sharp, handsome features, he commanded respect from everyone in the camp. His long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers he had earned through acts of bravery, and his dark eyes held an intensity that could make grown men step back. "Father, where is Little Hawk?" Swift Eagle asked, scanning the camp as warriors secured the last of the supplies. Chief Running Bear looked up sharply, his weathered face creasing with concern. He was helping the women gather firewood before the storm. He should be in his lodge by now. Swift Eagle's jaw tightened. He moved quickly through the camp, checking each teepee, asking every person he passed. No one had seen the boy since the storm began. With each passing moment, his worry intensified. Little Hawk was all he had left of his mother, who had died bringing warmth and love to their family even in the darkest times. The boy had been struggling since her death, and Swift Eagle had tried to fill the void, but he knew he could never replace a mother's love. "The white woman is also missing," Broken Arrow reported, appearing through the rain. "She was in her lodge, and now she is gone." Swift Eagle felt a surge of anger mixed with something else, something he did not want to examine too closely. The white captive had been a source of conflict within him since she arrived. He had voted against keeping her, arguing that she would bring nothing but trouble. Yet over the past 3 months he had found himself watching her when he thought no one was looking. She had not broken under captivity as he expected. Instead, she had adapted, learned, even shown kindness to Little Hawk when many in the tribe kept their distance from the boy's grief. "She would not run in this storm," Swift Eagle said, more to himself than to Broken Arrow. "She is not foolish." "Then where would she go?" the older warrior asked. Swift Eagle's eyes widened as understanding struck him like lightning. "Little Hawk," she heard him and went after him. Without another word, he grabbed his weapons and supplies. Chief Running Bear tried to stop him, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "You cannot go out in this storm. It is suicide. Wait until it passes." "Little Hawk cannot wait," Swift Eagle said, his voice hard as stone. "Every moment he is out there, he is in greater danger. And the white woman, if she is with him, she does not know the land. They will die without help. Then take warriors with you," his father commanded. Swift Eagle shook his head. "In this storm, a group will only slow me down. I can move faster alone. I know this land better than anyone. Trust me, father." Chief Running Bear looked into his son's eyes and saw the determination there, the fierce protective love that drove him. He nodded slowly, though fear gripped his heart. "Bring them both back safely." Swift Eagle pulled a heavy buffalo robe over his shoulders and stepped into the storm. The wind immediately tried to push him back, but he leaned into it, his powerful body cutting through the elements like a knife. He had grown up on these plains, had learned to read the land in all its moods, and even in this chaos, he could navigate by instinct and memory. He moved away from the camp, calling out for Little Hawk, listening for any sound that might guide him. The storm tried to steal his voice, but he persisted, shouting until his throat was raw. He scanned the ground for tracks, but the rain had washed everything away almost immediately. Still, he pressed on, moving in the direction he thought a frightened child might run. Lightning flashed, and in that brief moment of illumination, Swift Eagle saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 sets of footprints in a patch of mud that had not yet been completely obliterated by the rain. One small, one larger. The white woman and his brother moving away from camp and deeper into the open prairie. He followed the tracks as long as they lasted, and when they disappeared, he continued in the same direction, trusting his instincts. The storm showed no signs of weakening. If anything, it grew more violent with each passing minute. The temperature continued to drop, and Swift Eagle knew that exposure would become deadly if he did not find them soon. His mind turned to the white woman despite his efforts to focus only on his brother. Sarah, he had heard others call her. She had risked her life to save Little Hawk, had run into this storm without hesitation. That took courage, a quality he respected above all others. She could have stayed safe in her lodge, could have let the boy's fate be someone else's concern. But she had not. She had acted when no one else had heard the child's cries. Swift Eagle found himself pushing harder, moving faster. He had to find them, both of them. The wind shifted, and for a moment he thought he heard something. A voice, faint and distant, but definitely human. He changed direction slightly, moving toward the sound. He called out again, his powerful voice carrying even through the storm's fury. "Little Hawk, can you hear me? Call out if you can hear my voice." Nothing. Just the howl of wind and the relentless drumming of rain. Swift Eagle refused to give up. He continued forward, his eyes constantly scanning the gray landscape for any sign of life. Then he saw them. The rocky outcropping was barely visible through the rain, but Swift Eagle knew these formations. This was the place where he had come as a young man to fast and pray, to seek visions that would guide his path as a warrior. Under the overhang, huddled together in a soaked buffalo hide, were Sarah and Little Hawk. Relief flooded through him so intensely that it almost brought him to his knees. They were alive. He covered the remaining distance in seconds, calling out to them so they would not be startled by his sudden appearance. "Little Hawk, I am here!" The boy's head emerged from under the hide, his face lighting up with joy and relief. "Swift Eagle, you found us!" Sarah looked up as well, and Swift Eagle felt something shift in his chest when their eyes met. Her green eyes, so different from any he had ever known, held exhaustion, fear, and profound relief. Her auburn hair was plastered to her face and neck, and she was shaking violently from the cold, but she managed a weak smile. "Thank the heavens," she said in halting Cheyenne. "I did not know if anyone would come." Swift Eagle ducked under the overhang and immediately assessed their condition. Both were soaked through and shivering badly. Little Hawk looked exhausted but otherwise unharmed. Sarah, however, was in worse shape. Her lips had a blue tinge, and her movements were slow and uncoordinated, signs of dangerous cold. "We must get you back to camp immediately," he said, stripping off his own buffalo robe and wrapping it around Sarah. She tried to protest, but he silenced her with a sharp gesture. "You are colder than my brother. You need this more." He pulled Little Hawk into his arms, holding the boy against his chest where his body heat would help warm the child. Then he turned to Sarah, who was struggling to stand. Without hesitation, he reached out and pulled her to her feet, keeping one hand on her arm to steady her. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice gentler than he intended. "I will walk," she said firmly, though her voice shook. "I will not slow you down." Swift Eagle felt a flicker of admiration. Even now, in this condition, she showed strength and determination. "Stay close to me. Hold onto my arm if you need to. We will move together." They emerged from the shelter into the full force of the storm. Swift Eagle led the way, carrying Little Hawk with one arm while keeping Sarah close with the other. She gripped his arm tightly, and he could feel her trembling through the thick hide that wrapped them both. The journey back was brutal. The wind seemed to have grown even stronger, and the rain fell so thick that Swift Eagle had to navigate almost entirely by feel and memory. He moved with confidence, his powerful legs eating up the distance, but he constantly adjusted his pace to ensure Sarah could keep up. She stumbled several times, and each time, his arm was there to catch her. She never complained, never asked to stop or rest. She simply kept moving forward, matching his pace as best she could. Swift Eagle found himself impressed despite himself. This woman had more warrior spirit than many men he had known. "Why did you go after him?" Swift Eagle asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the storm. He had to know. "You could have died out here. Why risk your life for a Cheyenne child?" Sarah was silent for a moment, struggling to find words in his language. "He is a child," she finally said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "That is enough reason. And he was kind to me when others were not. I could not leave him alone and afraid." Swift Eagle felt something crack inside his carefully maintained walls. He had told himself that this white woman was his enemy, a symbol of the people who were destroying his nation's way of life. but she had just shown more humanity and courage than he wanted to acknowledge. "You are brave," he said simply. "My brother owes you his life." "You came into the storm to find us," Sarah replied, looking up at him through the rain. "That also required great courage. We are even." They continued in silence after that, but something had shifted between them. An understanding, fragile and new, but real nonetheless. When the shapes of the teepees finally emerged through the rain, Swift Eagle felt his muscles relax slightly. They had made it. They were home. Warriors rushed out to help, taking Little Hawk from his arms and ushering them all toward the warmth of Chief Running Bear's lodge, where a fire had been carefully maintained despite the storm. Inside, the relief was immediate. The wind and rain were shut out, replaced by flickering firelight and blessed warmth. Women immediately went to work, stripping Little Hawk of his wet clothes and wrapping him in warm, dry furs. Chief Running Bear embraced his youngest son, his weathered face showing the depth of his love and relief. Swift Eagle turned to check on Sarah and found her swaying on her feet, her eyes unfocused. Without thinking, he caught her as her legs gave out, lifting her into his arms as easily as he had lifted his young brother. She was so cold, her skin like ice against his. "She needs warmth immediately," he said to the women. She was protecting Little Hawk with her own body. She took the worst of the cold. The women exchanged glances but moved to help. They recognized that Swift Eagle, who had never shown the white captive anything but cold indifference, was now holding her with genuine concern. They stripped away her wet clothing, maintaining her modesty with careful movements, and wrapped her in the warmest furs available. Swift Eagle built up the fire until it roared with heat, then sat beside Sarah, monitoring her condition. Her shivering gradually subsided as warmth returned to her body. Color slowly came back to her lips and face. Little Hawk, now warm and dry, crawled over to sit beside her, taking her hand in his small one. "You saved me," the boy said softly. "You could have stayed safe, but you came for me." "Why?" Sarah opened her eyes and smiled at him, her expression tender. "Because you matter, Little Hawk. Because every life has value, and because you have shown me kindness in a place where I expected none." Chief Running Bear approached, his expression grave but not unkind. He looked at Sarah for a long moment before speaking. "You have done a great thing today, white woman. You risked your life to save my son when my own people did not hear his cries. This debt is not one I take lightly." He turned to Swift Eagle. "My son, what do you think we should do? This woman has proven herself." Swift Eagle looked at Sarah, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since she had been brought to their camp 3 months ago. He saw not just a white captive, not just an enemy, but a person of courage and compassion, a woman who had acted without hesitation to save a child who was not her own, from a people who held her prisoner. "She has earned respect," Swift Eagle said carefully. "She has earned better treatment than we have given her." Chief Running Bear nodded slowly. "Then it shall be so. From this day forward, you will no longer be guarded as a prisoner, Sarah Morrison. You will be a guest in our camp, free to move about as you wish. You have earned this with your courage and your heart." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. She had expected punishment for leaving her lodge without permission, or at best, to be ignored. She had not expected this. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say nothing," Chief Running Bear replied. "Actions speak louder than words, and your actions today spoke volumes. Rest now. Recover your strength. We will speak more when the storm has passed." As the night wore on and the storm finally began to weaken, Sarah drifted into an exhausted sleep, still wrapped in warm furs by the fire. Little Hawk slept beside her, his small hand still holding hers. Swift Eagle sat watch over them both, his mind churning with thoughts he could not quiet. This white woman had changed something in their camp today. She had changed something in him as well, though he was not yet ready to name what that something was. All he knew was that when he had seen her huddled in the storm with his brother, protecting the boy with her own body, he had felt something more powerful than gratitude. He had felt the first stirrings of something that both terrified and intrigued him, something that would make the coming days far more complicated than he could possibly imagine. The morning after the storm dawned clear and beautiful, as if nature itself was apologizing for its violence the night before. Sarah woke slowly, disoriented by the warmth and comfort surrounding her. For a moment she thought she was back in her father's mansion in Boston, wrapped in expensive silk sheets. Then reality settled over her like a blanket, and she remembered where she was and what had happened. She sat up carefully, wincing at the soreness in her muscles. Her body ached from the exertion of the previous day, but she was alive and warm. Little Hawk slept peacefully beside her, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Across the fire, Swift Eagle sat watching her, his dark eyes unreadable in the morning light. "You should rest more," he said quietly, so as not to wake the others in the lodge. "Your body needs time to recover from yesterday's ordeal." Sarah shook her head, pushing the furs aside and standing on unsteady legs. "I have rested enough. I am not accustomed to lying about when there is work to be done." Swift Eagle rose as well, moving toward her with an easy grace that seemed at odds with his powerful build. "You are no longer a prisoner here, Sarah Morrison. Chief Running Bear has declared it. You do not have to work if you do not wish to." The sound of her name on his lips, spoken with his distinctive accent, sent an unexpected shiver through her. She met his eyes and saw something there she had not seen before. Respect, certainly, but also curiosity, and perhaps something more complicated. "What else would I do?" she asked, managing a small smile. "I have been working since I arrived. It gives me purpose, keeps my mind occupied. I would prefer to continue, if that is acceptable." Swift Eagle studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then you will work, but as a member of this tribe, not as a captive. There is a difference." Over the following days, Sarah discovered just how much difference Chief Running Bear's proclamation had made. The women who had previously ignored her now included her in their conversations, teaching her more of their language and their ways. She was invited to join in the daily tasks of camp life, not as a servant, but as a participant. Children who had once stared at her with suspicious eyes now smiled and waved when she passed. But the most significant change was in Swift Eagle himself. The warrior seemed to find reasons to be near her throughout each day. He taught her how to properly tan a hide, his large hands guiding hers through the process with surprising gentleness. He showed her which plants could be eaten and which should be avoided, taking her on walks beyond the camp where they could speak without constant observation. He told her stories of his people, their history, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. Sarah found herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. He was unlike any man she had ever known. The gentlemen of Boston society had been soft, concerned with fashion and social standing, their masculinity expressed through wealth and position, rather than physical prowess. Swift Eagle was the opposite in every way. He was strong, capable, utterly confident in himself and his place in the world. When he spoke, people listened. When he moved, he did so with the controlled power of a predator. But it was not just his physical presence that attracted her. It was his intelligence, his dry sense of humor that emerged once he felt comfortable around her, his deep love for his family and his people. It was the way he could be fierce one moment and gentle the next, the way he treated Little Hawk with patient affection, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. "You are staring at my brother again," Little Hawk said one afternoon, his young voice full of mischief. He had recovered completely from his ordeal and had become Sarah's constant companion, following her around camp like a devoted shadow. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I was not staring. I was simply observing." "You observe him a lot," the boy said with a knowing grin far too old for his 7 years. "And he observes you too. I have seen it. Everyone has seen it." "Little Hawk," Sarah said, trying to sound stern but failing to suppress a smile, "you should not say such things." "Why not? It is true. Swift Eagle is a great warrior. Many women in the tribe wish to marry him, but he has never chosen anyone. My father says he is too particular, that he wants something more than just a wife to cook his meals and bear his children." Sarah's heart beat faster at this information, though she tried to tell herself it meant nothing. "And what does Swift Eagle say to this?" Little Hawk shrugged. "He says that when he finds the right woman he will know. He says his heart will tell him." The boy looked up at her with eyes that seemed far too perceptive. "I think maybe his heart is telling him now." Before Sarah could respond, Swift Eagle himself appeared, carrying a freshly killed deer across his shoulders. He had been hunting since dawn, and his success was evident. The camp would eat well tonight. "Little Hawk," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Come help me prepare this meat. It is time you learned the proper way to honor the animal that has given its life to feed us." The boy scampered off eagerly, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She watched as Swift Eagle began teaching his brother the sacred rituals of the hunt, his patience and care evident in every movement. This was a man who understood the weight of responsibility, who honored tradition, while also being able to see beyond the limits of his own experience. That evening, as the tribe gathered around the central fire to share the meat from Swift Eagle's hunt, Chief Running Bear made an announcement that changed everything. "My people," the chief began, his voice strong despite his advancing years. "A messenger arrived this afternoon while we were preparing for tonight's feast. He brings troubling news from the east. The white soldiers are coming. They are searching for captives taken in raids, and they have heard reports of a white woman in our camp." A murmur ran through the gathered tribe. Sarah felt her stomach clench with sudden fear. She had almost forgotten about the world beyond this camp, had almost allowed herself to believe she could stay here forever. Chief Running Bear continued, his weathered face grave. "The soldiers give us 3 days. If we do not return the white woman by then, they will attack our village. They have many men and many guns. Our warriors are brave, but we would be fighting against great odds." Swift Eagle stood abruptly, his expression dark. "This is unacceptable. Sarah Morrison is no longer a captive. She is a guest, a member of our tribe. She saved Little Hawk's life. We cannot simply hand her over to the soldiers like a piece of property." "What would you have us do?" asked Grey Wolf, one of the elder warriors. "Fight a battle we cannot win? Sacrifice our women and children for one white woman?" "She is not just any white woman," Swift Eagle shot back, his voice rising with passion. "She has proven her courage and her heart. She has earned the right to choose her own path." All eyes turned to Sarah. She stood slowly, aware that every person in the camp was watching her, waiting to hear what she would say. Her mind raced, torn between conflicting desires and duties. "Chief Running Bear," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her, "I do not wish to bring harm to your people. You have shown me great kindness, especially after I helped Little Hawk. If my leaving will prevent bloodshed, then I will go to the soldiers willingly." "No," Swift Eagle said, the single word carrying the weight of absolute conviction. He moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "There is another way." Chief Running Bear raised an eyebrow. "Speak, my son, what do you propose?" Swift Eagle took a deep breath, and Sarah could see him gathering his courage for what he was about to say. "Sarah Morrison is no longer a captive. She has proven herself worthy of being Cheyenne. If she were to become truly one of us through marriage to a warrior of this tribe, the soldiers would have no claim on her. She would be protected by tribal law." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? And which warrior would take this responsibility? Chief Running Bear asked, though there was a knowing gleam in his eye that suggested he already knew the answer. Swift Eagle turned to Sarah, his dark eyes intense and full of emotion he had been holding back for weeks. "I would. If Sarah Morrison would consent to be my wife, I would take her as my own. I would protect her with my life, honor her as my equal, and stand beside her against any who would seek to harm her." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This proud warrior, this man she had come to admire and, yes, love, though she had barely admitted it to herself, was offering her not just protection, but partnership, not just safety, but belonging. "Why?" she whispered, searching his face for the truth. "Why would you do this for me?" Swift Eagle reached out and took her hand, his touch sending warmth through her entire body. "Because when I found you in that storm, protecting my brother with your own body, I saw who you truly are. Because every day since then, I have watched you adapt, learn, grow stronger. Because you laugh with Little Hawk and treat our elders with respect. Because you do not see us as savages to be feared, but as people to be understood." He paused, his voice dropping lower, meant only for her ears. And because when I think of my future, I see you in it, not as a captive, not as a burden, but as my partner, my equal, my wife. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. All her life she had been promised to men who saw her as a possession, a means to advance their social standing or business interests. Her father had arranged her marriage to a man she had never met, treating her like a commodity to be traded. But Swift Eagle was offering her something entirely different. He was offering her a choice, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine feeling. I never thought I would find freedom in captivity, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I would find home among people I was taught to fear, but you have shown me that home is not a place. It is the people who see you, truly see you, and value you for who you are. She squeezed his hand, her decision made. Yes, Swift Eagle, I will marry you. A cheer went up from the tribe, and Sarah found herself surrounded by smiling faces and congratulations. Little Hawk launched himself at her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Now you will truly be my family, he exclaimed, his joy infectious. Chief Running Bear stood and raised his hand for silence. Then it is decided. 3 days from now, when the soldiers arrive, they will find no captive in our camp. They will find Swift Eagle's wife, a woman who has chosen to become Cheyenne, who has earned her place among us through courage and compassion. We will prepare for a wedding ceremony tomorrow at sunset. Tonight, we celebrate. The feast that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. There was music and dancing, stories and laughter. The women pulled her aside and began teaching her about the marriage ceremony, about what would be expected of her as Swift Eagle's wife. They spoke of him with respect and affection, telling her stories of his bravery, his kindness, his unwavering loyalty to his family and tribe. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, Swift Eagle found Sarah sitting by the fire, watching the flames dance in the darkness. He sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. "Are you frightened?" he asked softly. Sarah considered the question carefully. "I should be," she admitted. "Everything is happening so fast. A few months ago I was being taken west to marry a man I had never met, to live a life that had been chosen for me by others. Now I am about to marry a Cheyenne warrior and become part of a tribe that once held me captive. It is all so unexpected. But are you frightened?" Swift Eagle pressed, his eyes searching her face. Sarah turned to look at him, this strong, handsome man who had somehow captured her heart when she was not looking. "No," she said with conviction. "I am not frightened. For the first time in my life, I am exactly where I'm meant to be, with someone who sees me not as an object to be possessed, but as a person to be cherished. How could I be frightened of that?" Swift Eagle smiled, a rare and beautiful expression that transformed his usually serious face. "I will spend every day of our life together, making sure you never regret this choice," he promised. "You have my word, Sarah. You will be honored, protected, and loved." "Loved?" Sarah asked, her heart skipping a beat at the word. "Yes," Swift Eagle said simply. "I love you, Sarah Morrison. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you in that storm, but I was too stubborn and too bound by old prejudices to admit it. But I am admitting it now. I love you and I want to build a life with you." Sarah felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "I do not know when it happened, but somewhere between learning to tan hides and listening to your stories, somewhere between watching you with Little Hawk and feeling your hand in mine, I fell in love with you." Swift Eagle reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "Then tomorrow we will make it official before the tribe and the spirits. You will become my wife, and I will become your husband. We will face whatever comes together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the fire burn low. Around them, the camp settled into sleep, but Sarah had never felt more awake, more alive. She was on the verge of beginning a new chapter of her life, one she had never imagined, but one that felt more right than anything that had come before. Tomorrow, she would marry Swift Eagle. In 3 days, soldiers would arrive looking for a captive and find instead a willing bride. Her old life in Boston, with its constraints and expectations, felt like it belonged to another person entirely. She was no longer the pampered daughter of a railroad magnate, being shipped west like cargo. She was Sarah Morrison, soon to be Swift Eagle's wife, a woman who had found courage she did not know she possessed, love she did not know existed, and a home in the most unexpected of places. The wedding ceremony took place as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. The entire tribe gathered in a circle around the central fire, which had been built up specially for the occasion. Sarah had been prepared by the women of the tribe, dressed in a beautiful buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork that had taken them most of the day to complete. Her auburn hair had been braided with strips of soft leather and decorated with small white feathers, symbols of purity and new beginnings. Swift Eagle stood waiting for her, dressed in his finest ceremonial clothing. His broad chest was bare except for a breastplate made of bone and beads, and his muscular arms were adorned with bands of silver traded from other tribes. His long black hair hung loose around his shoulders, and the eagle feathers he had earned through acts of bravery were woven into a single braid at his temple. When Sarah emerged from the women's lodge and their eyes met across the gathering, she saw her entire future reflected in his gaze. Chief Running Bear stood between them, his weathered hands raised to the sky. "Great Spirit," he intoned, his voice carrying to every corner of the camp. "We gather today to witness the joining of two souls, two people from different worlds, who have found in each other something precious and rare. Swift Eagle, son of my blood, finest warrior of our people, and Sarah Morrison, who came to us as a stranger but has proven herself worthy through courage and compassion." The chief gestured for them to approach. Sarah walked forward, her heart beating so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Swift Eagle moved toward her with that powerful, controlled grace she had come to love. They met before Chief Running Bear, their hands finding each other instinctively. "Swift Eagle," the chief said, turning to his son, "do you take this woman as your wife, to honor and protect, to stand beside through all the seasons of life in times of plenty and times of hardship?" "I do," Swift Eagle said, his voice strong and unwavering. "Before the Great Spirit and before our people, I claim Sarah as my wife. I will protect her with my life, honor her with my actions, and love her with all that I am." Chief Running Bear turned to Sarah. "Sarah Morrison, do you take this warrior as your husband, to honor and support, to stand beside through all the seasons of life, in times of plenty and times of hardship?" Sarah's voice was clear and certain. "I do. Before the Great Spirit and before this tribe, I claim Swift Eagle as my husband. I will stand beside him in all things, support him with my strength, and love him with all that I am." The chief took a long strip of soft leather and wrapped it around their joined hands, binding them together. "What the Great Spirit has joined, let no man tear asunder. You are now husband and wife, bound together until the end of your days." A great cheer went up from the tribe. Little Hawk rushed forward and hugged them both, his young face beaming with happiness. "Now you are truly my brother's wife. Now you are truly part of our family." Swift Eagle lifted Sarah's bound hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his dark eyes full of love and promise. "My wife," he said softly, as if testing the words and finding them perfect. "My husband," Sarah replied, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, with dancing and singing that continued long into the night. Sarah found herself swept into the circle of women, learning the traditional dances, laughing at her own clumsy attempts to match their graceful movements. Swift Eagle was surrounded by warriors offering congratulations and good-natured teasing about his choice of bride. But as the night deepened, Swift Eagle found his way back to Sarah's side. He took her hand and led her away from the celebration, toward the teepee that had been prepared for them as a married couple. It was larger than most, positioned at the edge of the camp with a view of the open prairie beyond. Inside, a fire had been laid, and furs arranged to create a warm, inviting space. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness as Swift Eagle secured the entrance flap behind them, giving them privacy for the first time since they had declared their feelings for each other. "Are you tired?" Swift Eagle asked, his voice gentle. "No," Sarah said honestly. "I am too excited to be tired. Everything has changed so quickly, and yet it all feels so right." Swift Eagle moved closer, reaching out to cup her face in his large, calloused hands. I meant what I said during the ceremony. I will spend every day making sure you never regret choosing me, choosing this life. Sarah placed her hands over his. I could never regret this. You have given me something I never had before, Swift Eagle. You have given me the freedom to choose my own path, to be seen as a person rather than a possession. That is a gift beyond measure. He kissed her then, slowly and thoroughly, pouring into that kiss all the feelings he had been holding back for weeks. Sarah responded with equal passion, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. I love you, Swift Eagle murmured against her hair. My brave, beautiful wife. I love you too, Sarah whispered back. My strong, honorable husband. They spent their first night as husband and wife talking and learning each other, building the foundation of their life together. Swift Eagle told her more about his childhood, about the traditions of his people, about his dreams for the future. Sarah shared stories of Boston, of the life she had left behind, explaining why she had never felt she belonged in that world of rigid social rules and empty pleasantries. I think I was always meant to find my way here, Sarah said as they lay together wrapped in warm furs, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls of the teepee. To you, to this tribe, to this life. Perhaps being taken from that wagon train was not the tragedy I thought it was. Perhaps it was the path that led me home. Swift Eagle tightened his arms around her. Then I am grateful to whatever forces brought you to us, even if the circumstances were difficult. You have brought light into my life, Sarah. You have reminded me that strength comes in many forms, that courage is not just about facing an enemy in battle, but also about opening your heart to someone despite all the reasons not to. The next 2 days passed in a blur of happiness. Sarah settled into her new role as Swift Eagle's wife, learning from the other married women, helping with the daily tasks of camp life, but now as a full member of the tribe rather than an outsider. Little Hawk was a constant presence, delighting in having Sarah as part of his family, teaching her games and introducing her to the other children who now accepted her completely. But beneath the joy, there was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew the soldiers were coming. Scouts reported their approach, confirming that a contingent of cavalry was indeed moving toward the Cheyenne camp, led by an officer who was reportedly determined to recover the white captive and punish the tribe for taking her. On the morning of the 3rd day, Swift Eagle and several other warriors rode out to meet the soldiers before they reached the camp. Sarah insisted on accompanying them, riding behind Swift Eagle on his powerful horse. She needed to face this final challenge, to make it clear that she was no longer a captive, but a willing member of the Cheyenne tribe. The soldiers were camped about 5 miles from the village, a force of perhaps 30 men in blue uniforms, their rifles stacked in neat rows, their horses tethered in organized lines. When they saw the Cheyenne delegation approaching, they formed up into a defensive position, hands on their weapons. A tall officer with graying hair and hard eyes stepped forward. I am Captain Marcus Thornton of the United States Cavalry, he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. I am here for Sarah Morrison, the white woman taken captive 3 months ago from a wagon train. We have been authorized to use force if necessary to secure her release. Swift Eagle guided his horse forward, Sarah's arms tight around his waist. When they stopped, he helped her dismount with careful hands before sliding down himself. They stood together, united, facing the captain. I am Sarah Morrison, Sarah said clearly, her voice steady and strong. And I am no longer a captive. I am the wife of Swift Eagle, a warrior of the Cheyenne people. I have chosen to remain here of my own free will. Captain Thornton's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Miss Morrison, I know the circumstances of your capture. You were taken by force, held against your will. These savages have likely threatened you, coerced you into saying these things. You do not have to be afraid. We are here to rescue you and return you to civilization. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest at his words, at his dismissive tone and his assumptions. Captain, I am not speaking under duress. I am speaking the truth. Yes, I was initially taken as a captive, but that situation has changed dramatically. These people, whom you so casually dismiss as savages, have shown me more respect and humanity than I ever experienced in so-called civilized society." She stepped forward, her green eyes blazing with conviction. "Do you know what was waiting for me in that wagon train, Captain? An arranged marriage to a man I had never met, a man my father sold me to in a business transaction. I was being shipped west like a piece of cargo, with no say in my own future, no choice in my own life. Is that your definition of civilization? Being treated as property?" The captain shifted uncomfortably, but maintained his stern expression. "Your father has been notified of your capture, Miss Morrison. He is offering a substantial reward for your safe return. He wants you back." "My father wants his business deal back," Sarah corrected sharply. "He wants the advantageous marriage he arranged. But I am not going back to that life, Captain. I have found something here that I never had before. I have found respect, partnership, and love. I have married a man who sees me as his equal, who values my courage and my choices. I am staying here by my own free will, and I am asking you to respect that choice." Captain Thornton looked from Sarah to Swift Eagle and back again. "You are telling me you want to stay with these Indians? To live in primitive conditions? To give up everything you knew?" "I am telling you that I have found my home," Sarah said firmly. "And yes, I am choosing to stay." Swift Eagle spoke then, his English surprisingly good, his voice carrying authority. "Captain Thornton, my wife speaks the truth. She is here by choice, protected by tribal law as my spouse. We do not wish for conflict, but we will defend our people and our family if forced. Sarah Morrison has become one of us, and we do not abandon our own." The captain studied them for a long moment, his military mind clearly working through the implications. Finally, he sighed heavily. "This is highly irregular, Miss Morrison, or whatever you call yourself now. However, if you are truly here by your own choice, as a married woman and not a captive, I have no legal grounds to force your return. The Army's mission was to rescue a captive, not to abduct a willing bride." Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. Swift Eagle's hand immediately came to her back, steadying her. "However," the captain continued, his voice hardening, "I must report this situation to your father. He may not accept your decision. He has considerable influence, Miss Morrison. This may not be the end of the matter." "Then let my father come himself if he wishes to speak with me," Sarah said, raising her chin defiantly. "Let him see that I am happy, that I am loved, that I have chosen a life that brings me joy, instead of the gilded cage he tried to lock me in. I am no longer that obedient daughter who accepted everything he decided for her. I am Swift Eagle's wife, and I am home." Captain Thornton nodded slowly, respect grudgingly entering his expression. "Very well. I will report that Sarah Morrison was found alive and well, married to a Cheyenne warrior, and choosing to remain with her husband's tribe of her own free will. The Army considers this matter closed." He looked at Swift Eagle. "Take care of her. She is a brave woman, braver than many men I have commanded. She deserves to be treated well. She will be honored every day of her life," Swift Eagle promised. "This I swear." The captain turned to give orders to his men to break camp and prepare to return east. As the soldiers began moving with practiced efficiency, he looked back at Sarah one more time. "I hope you find the happiness you are seeking, Mrs." He paused, uncertain. "Sarah, wife of Swift Eagle," she said, feeling pride in the title. "Thank you, Captain, for respecting my choice. That means more than you know." The ride back to the Cheyenne camp was jubilant. The warriors who had accompanied them whooped and called out in celebration, their voices carrying across the prairie. When they arrived, the entire tribe poured out to greet them, eager to hear what had transpired. Chief Running Bear listened to the report with a grave expression that slowly transformed into a smile. "The soldiers are gone, and they will not return," he announced to the gathered people. "Sarah, wife of Swift Eagle, is truly one of us now, recognized even by the white man's army. This is a great day for our tribe. We have gained a daughter of courage and spirit." That night, there was another celebration, this one even more joyous than the wedding feast. Sarah found herself surrounded by people who had become her family, who accepted her completely. Little Hawk stayed close to her side, his small hand in hers, his face glowing with happiness. As the celebration wound down and people began drifting to their lodges, Swift Eagle and Sarah walked together to the edge of the camp. The night sky was brilliant with stars, the moon casting silver light across the prairie. They stood hand in hand, looking out at the vast expanse of land that was now truly their home. "No regrets?" Swift Eagle asked softly, his arm coming around her waist. Sarah leaned into his warmth, feeling complete in a way she had never experienced before. "Not a single one. This is where I belong, Swift Eagle. With you, with Little Hawk, with this tribe. Everything that happened, all the fear and uncertainty and struggle, it was all worth it to bring me here, to bring me to you." "You are remarkable," Swift Eagle said, turning her to face him. "You came into our camp as a captive, frightened and alone, torn from everything you knew. And you could have stayed bitter, could have remained closed off and hostile. Instead, you opened your heart. You learned our ways, showed compassion to a grieving child, risked your life in a storm without hesitation. You turned captivity into freedom, strangers into family, and you stole the heart of a warrior who thought he would never find his match." Sarah reached up to cup his face, her fingers tracing the strong lines of his jaw. "You gave me something I never had in my old life, Swift Eagle. You gave me the freedom to choose, the respect to be seen as an equal, and the love to know I am valued for who I truly am. That is a gift beyond any wealth or social position. You have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible." They kissed under the stars, two people from different worlds who had found in each other something rare and precious. When they finally pulled apart, Swift Eagle rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise you, my wife, that every sunrise we see together will be a blessing. Every challenge we face, we will face together. Every joy we experience will be doubled because we share it. You are my heart, Sarah, and I will love you until my last breath. And I will love you until mine," Sarah whispered back. "My husband, my home, my heart." They walked back to their lodge hand in hand, ready to begin their life together in earnest. Behind them, the Cheyenne camp settled into peaceful sleep, the fires burning low, the stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. Sarah had been lost in a storm, both literal and metaphorical, torn from one life and thrust into another. But that storm had led her exactly where she needed to be. She had found courage she did not know she possessed when she ran into the tempest to save Little Hawk. She had found respect and belonging with people she had been taught to fear. She had found love with a warrior who saw her strength and matched it with his own. And she had found freedom in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a man who had once been her captor but had become her partner, her equal, her beloved husband. As Swift Eagle secured the entrance to their lodge and drew her into his arms, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that her journey, for all its pain and fear and uncertainty, had brought her home, not to a place, but to a person, not to captivity, but to the truest freedom she had ever known. The freedom to choose, to love, to be loved in return. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And tomorrow, Sarah would wake beside the man she loved, in the home she had chosen, among the people who had become her family. She would wake not as a captive, not as a commodity, not as someone else's possession, but as herself. Sarah, wife of Swift Eagle, member of the Cheyenne tribe, a woman who had found her place in the world against all odds. And that, she thought, as sleep claimed her in Swift Eagle's warm embrace, was the greatest adventure of all. Not the storm or the danger or the dramatic confrontation with soldiers, but the quiet, profound discovery that home was not something you were born into or forced to accept. Home was something you chose, something you built with courage and compassion and love. And she had built it well, brick by brick, choice by choice, until she had created something beautiful and lasting. The son of the Cheyenne had gotten lost in the storm, and only the white woman captive had followed his cries. But in saving him, she had saved herself, finding in that moment of courage the key to her own freedom. And she had found in Swift Eagle's arms the love she had been searching for all her life without even knowing it. Their story had begun in chaos and captivity, but it would continue in love and partnership. two souls united against whatever challenges the future might bring. And Sarah knew with the certainty that comes from the heart that they would face those challenges together, as equals, as partners, as husband and wife, forever.